Welcome back. With elections coming up in a few months, we're discussing Iraq's prospects for finding a long-lasting peace. And joining us is the former Prime Minister, Allawi, who led the country from June 2004 until April 2005. Dr. Allawi will be briefing the US Congress this week on his visit to Washington. So before, we were asking about the elections coming up, but in terms of, for example, the Iraqi forces now, everyone wonders how well can Iraq look after itself? How do you assess the performance of the Iraqi troops, the Iraqi forces? Are they ready to take on the full responsibility? And do they have the resources to do so?
Well, they don't, and they are not ready. I think Iraq requires two very important problems to attend to, and as soon as possible. One is really relates to the political process itself, where it should be inclusive, it should not marginalize people, and it should be a wide-reaching, including rediscussing the constitution itself. The second is building the institutions of the state, and this is still far away, because everything, unfortunately, is divided and based on sectarian issues. And sectarianism have proven to be synonymous to extremism and to violence. So that's why we don't think the armed forces and the police are a professional force. There are a lot of militias that have been incorporated in these institutions. They lack the discipline and they lack the resources.
We have a call on the line from Louisiana here in the US. Salim, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, my question to the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, is Iraq in the next election going to be first Shiite country in Shiite Arab Iraq, and how this state going to be accepted or integrated among other Arab countries? Thanks.
Thank you. No, I think Iraq would remain as Iraq for all Iraqis. I think Iraq would remain part of the Arab world and part of the Islamic world. And this is at least what we are hoping for, and this is why we want to engage in the next elections.
Well, sir, how do you assess the political strength of the current Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki? How would you do things differently from what he's doing now?
Well, to start with, we embarked on building the institutions of the country, including getting significant numbers of the old army and police into service. I think the current government and the current Prime Minister need to address the issues that I mentioned a bit earlier. They need to be inclusive. They need to reconcile with the various political groups inside the country. They need to address or readdress the constitution, and definitely they need to get away from sectarianism and to build institutions from all Iraqis and for all Iraqis. These are the basic things that are required to be done in Iraq, and this is where I think the government have not done so far.
We have Reginald from Fiji on the line. Reginald, thanks for your patience. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I just recall Mr. Malawi saying earlier in the debate that the word civilization or civilized. I like to make the point that this word is used quite frequently nowadays. Mind you, Iraq was the first place to be civilized, as archaeologists have agreed. And here we're talking about civilization. The United States version of it, is it? The United States is only 200 years old. Thank you.
Okay. A comment there, of course, that perhaps the wrong country is teaching lessons to the Iraqis. In terms of the influence overall on the psyche of the Iraqi people, what do you think has been done over these past 6-7 years?
Well, really, it's unfortunate. There is a depletion of manpower. There is an exodus of millions of Iraqis, rising unemployment. Imagine with a wealthy country such as Iraq, those who are living under the poverty line, beneath the poverty line, exceeds the 30% of the total population. And yet it is one of the richest countries in the world, if not the greater Middle East. So this is definitely will leave some scars on Iraq. But we hope that the democratic process will pick up and the elections will be fought on a fair basis, and that the Iraqi people will be allowed to express their views and to vote for whomever they wish that should represent them.
Well, our viewers sending questions through different ways. We got a tweet through Twitter from Faris Al-Farik, who is in Texas in the USA, who says Iraq could retrogress back to a police state if the violence continues after the US leaves. In your opinion, how effective has the troop pullback been, and what are the potential consequences if and when the US leaves?
Well, we
By
have
the way,
seen.
sorry, sir, do you believe the US will completely leave or not?
Well, it is redeploying now. They say that they'll be leaving. I don't think they'll have the luxury to remain because they are facing problems everywhere almost. And I think they should be leaving. This is the mandate, at least. This is the agreement with Iraq. Spells out that they should, by the end of 2011, leave the country. However, I think we have seen the effect of the withdrawal of the American forces from cities and what we call the Black Wednesday, when more than 150 Iraqis were killed and hundreds were injured. And this does reflect that the security situation is still fragile, and the Iraqi both police, security forces and army are not ready yet to face the consequences.
Although the Status of Forces Agreement, or SOFA agreement, that sets the guidelines for America's involvement in troop involvement in Iraq, has just some people created the fear that Iraq will end up as a sort of dependent, a protectorate of the US.
I don't think so. Iraq resents any foreign intervention, as any other Middle Eastern countries, as any other country in the world. I think the Iraqis now have felt that they need to take their own destiny in their hands themselves. And you could see the tremors throughout the country and the violence which is spreading because they are not at ease with whatever is happening in the country.
If you're back in power, what would you do with those large permanent looking bases that the Americans have?
Well, they need to be renegotiated, but most importantly, we need to rely on our own forces. We need to establish a regional stability understanding based on economic relationship and trade, and this is really will suffice and will make us not depend on foreign troops and foreign forces.
The big fear for many has been that during the turmoil in Iraq, the vacuum that's been created politically in some cases has allowed Iran to have much greater influence. What's your concern? What's your view on Iran's role in Iraq now?
Well, definitely when you have such a vacuum as have happened in Iraq after the war, and this vacuum is only continuing, definitely neighboring countries will be alarmed and they will try and pick up and defend for themselves. Especially also knowing that Iran and the United States do not enjoy that much of good relations, and Iran is always too hesitant to trust what the Americans are threatening to do to Iran. But I think these issues should be settled between Iraq, between Iran, between Iraq and the rest of the neighbors under the auspices of the United Nations, and I think dialogue should prevail, and ultimately the peoples of these regions are responsible for its own protection. It's not going to be the United States.
Well, a viewer sent us a question through Facebook. Kieran Baker wrote in saying, is Dr. Allawi concerned about the recent US-Syria efforts to normalize relations? What's the potential?
I hope this will work. I hope that Syria would be there would be dialogue with Syria to try and reach to an understanding. I hope also there will be a dialogue throughout the region between the United States and other countries. I think, frankly, the United States needs to examine its policies and needs to understand that force alone is not going to change the face of the Middle East. We need to resort to dialogue. We need to discuss. We need to have an understanding, and definitely to assure countries that they are not going to be harassed or intimidated.
We have less than 30 seconds. I presume if you come back into power, you won't shut down the Al Jazeera bureau in Baghdad like you did in 2004.
Not this time, not anymore.
Dr. Allawi, thank you very much. We hope to get an update on your visit to the US and your visit to Congress as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Riz.
So it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining with your questions as well. That's all we have time for today. Remember, you can follow our program on Twitter and send us your questions and comments to use on the show. We'll try to get to those if you do send us them. On the next show, Unleashing the Power of Women, the Pulitzer Prize-winning husband and wife team of Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wudunn join us to discuss what can be done to end oppression of women in the developing world. Well, that's it from me and the team for now. We'll see you next time.